Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Marsha, Head of Partnerships at Kilimanjaro Consulting, and we are thrilled to have you join us today. We're especially excited to be joined by the team from ProSpend for a discussion on a critical topic, fraud. Fraud is one of the most persistent and costly challenges facing organizations of all sizes in current times. Today, we'll explore how automating your expense and accounts payable workflows can significantly reduce fraud risk, enhance compliance, and empower your finance team with greater control and visibility. Prospen has been a long-standing partner of Kilimanjaro, and many of you may know it by its original name, Expense Manager. Launched in 2011, the platform was born from first-hand experience. Sharon, ProSpen's founder and current CEO, was running a corporate travel agency at the time and saw just how inefficient manual expense reconciliation processes were. Driven by that insight, she developed and launched Australia's first locally built expense management solution. Since then, ProSpend has evolved far beyond its original scope, now offering a comprehensive platform that covers expense management, accounts payable automation, virtual cards, spend analytics, and much more. And there is also work already underway to launch a new payments module later this year. So, very excited to explore how ProSpend's tools can help you automate and protect your finance operations. A few things to mention before we dive in. Today's session is being recorded and will be sent to the attendees and people who have registered. You will all see a Q&A button within your Zoom interface. Please feel free to ask us anything relevant to this topic throughout the session so that others can also see the questions and add to the conversation. We will reserve time at the end of the session to answer these. So, without wasting any more time, please join me in welcoming Finn and Dante from ProSpend. Over to you, Finn.
Thank you, Marsha, and good morning, everyone. So today, as Marsha mentioned, Dante and I are going to take you through a little bit about ProSpend, the cost of fraud, and how obviously we can help with that. We all know that traditional AP processes, they can be clunky, time-consuming, and in some cases vulnerable, make you vulnerable. So it could be that fake invoice slipping through, it could be some duplicate payments and missing receipts. So these small issues can really add up to quite a serious risk. So ProSpend itself is built to change that. So it can give businesses complete visibility and tighter control over every transaction. So starting off, we can just see the agenda here about what we're going to be taking you through to today. So starting off with the cost of fraud. So when we think about fraud in finance, we often imagine big headlining making cases, but in reality, most business fraud is far more ordinary and much harder to detect. So according to the ACCC and industry reports, procurement and invoice fraud cost Australian businesses well over $1.2 billion a year. And in short, that's just what gets reported. So the real figure is actually much higher. And the scary part of that is that often these aren't even revolving around complex scams. A lot of the fraud incidents, they come down to basic process gaps, things like duplicate payments, fictitious suppliers, or even slightly inflated invoice amounts that could slip through the cracks. In some cases, it might not even be malicious. It could come down just to human error or something that goes unnoticed because you're failing to see that visibility. So when your AP process is manual or spread across disconnected tools, finance is constantly playing at relying on people to spot what automation could catch in seconds. And when things are missed, it doesn't just hurt the bottom line, it damages supplier relationships, leads to audit headaches, and exposes your business. So that's why we're here today. We're going to show you how automation done right can stop fraud before it starts and give you peace of mind that your financial controls are working exactly as they should. So kicking things off, just a little bit about who we are. So ProSpend, as Marsha was so eloquently putting, was built in Australia. We were built with local finance teams in mind. So we worked really closely with our clients to solve real problems, like manual invoicing, processing, compliance gaps, and limited visibility across departments. So what makes ProSpend a little bit different is that it's an end-to-end platform. Whether you're managing invoices, employee expenses, purchase orders, or travel spend, it all sits in that one centralized control. And it also offers that real-time reporting as well. So it does integrate seamlessly with platforms such as Acumatica and MYOB Exo and other ERP tools, meaning there's no double handling and no data gaps in that either. So the first module that we're going to sort of look at today is, apologies, so we'll go through why ProSpend is built the way that it's built. So my apologies, was the invoice automation. So invoices are a huge area of risk for businesses in this day. So as we're touching on in this webinar, it's fraud. As I mentioned before, human error or simple processing delays can also affect this. So with ProSpend, the invoice automation module changes that. So invoices are scanned with the OCR technology, and that's the moment that they enter the system. Key data is captured instantly, and the system can validate the invoice against existing purchase orders and goods received notes using three-way matching, which is very important in today's businesses. So this means you actually only pay for what you've ordered and received. And because everything is automated, your AP team spends less time chasing those approvals or correcting errors. So in short, it's faster, safer, and built for compliance. Second module we're going to go through today is expense management. So employees' expenses and corporate card spend are two areas, and this visibility can slip really quickly. So this is where ProSpend can step in. So staff can easily upload, your receipts via mobile with our application. You can email it to a specific email or browse through your browser. So the OCR technology, similar to that of the accounts payable automation, extracts and codes that data instantly. And so the policy controls ensure that only compliant claims make it through to approval. So you do have that checking ability. So corporate card transactions are also directly fed into ProSpend. So they're auto-matched with receipts and tagged with the correct coding. So you can set limits with that. You can define your spend categories and track usage, all in real time. So you're really, really noticing that fraud risk that comes through if you do notice it straight away. So together, this creates a closed loop system, and that reduces your fraud risk. It eliminates reconciliation delays and then puts your finance team essentially back in control of employee spend. So alongside this is a little bit of an add-on which ProSpend offers as well. So the virtual cards are actually one of the most powerful tools we've found for reducing fraud and improving procurement control. With ProSpend, you can generate secure single-use or vendor-specific virtual cards. So they are tied to the specific transaction or department. So there's no risk of card details being misused or shared. Every card has built-in controls like expiry dates, merchant category restrictions, and spend caps. So you're safe on that as well. This actually makes it perfect as a use case for one-off purchases, team spending, or even employee onboarding, where you need that extra flexibility, but over we also look at when looking at the hidden cost of fraud is purchase orders. So one of the best ways to actually stop that fraud initially is by managing the spend before it happens. And that's where purchase order module comes in. Employees can raise purchase orders that go through a structured approval flow, ensuring that the spend is approved before the money leaves the business. So when an invoice is received, it's automatically matched back to the original purchase order and the goods received. So you know exactly what you're paying for. This not only prevents unauthorized spend, but it also improves supplier compliance and reduces the chance of duplicate orders. So it's spend control made very, very easy. So travel. So some businesses these days have to do a lot of travel, whether you're an account executive on the road, you're going for a conference, whether that's, domestic or international. So having a travel management application that tracks your expenses, that then reduces your fraud and the potential of even some dodgy FPOS machines, which we've all seen in the news, it is a real cost. And so being able to see this, really quickly is vitally important for businesses nowadays. So business travel, in short, is where costs can quickly get out of hand as well. Especially when bookings and expenses are managed across a plethora of systems. So ProSpend, what we aim for in this travel module is essentially into the same environment as all your other spend. So travel booking's been built in, so only compliant trips are approved. When the receipts start coming in, they're matched automatically and tracked against the original trip. So we do actually get that enriched travel data if you use a booking software or some other travel management company. So it will flow through to ProSpend. So this does eliminate that messy spreadsheet, and all manual follow-ups and policy breaches. So that gives finance teams sort of real visibility on their travel spend. So finally, with integration and auditability, none of this works in isolation, ProSpend, and that's where integration is really key. So ProSpend connects directly with your finance system, whether that's MYOB Acumatica or Exo, to ensure that all your data is accurate and up to date. So each transaction is marked from start to finish with a full audit trail. That's also available at any time as well. So as we're bringing back to the source of what we're here to talk about today, it's about instantly recognizing fraud. So there's no more scrambling for receipts either with these integrations during your audit season, and no more gaps between procurement, finance, and operations, the three major things to do with businesses nowadays. So with live dashboards and reporting within ProSpend, you can track your spend across the business, you can spot these problems early and make better decisions. As a side note, purchase orders can be raised in ProSpend or via your finance system and pushed into the platform. So this keeps your workflows flexible, but also very, very centralized. Great. So now I'd like to pass over to my colleague, Dante, who is going to take us through the platform.
Today's plan of demonstration will be to run you through the AP invoice automation tool. And after that, I'll go through the expense management part of the system. Firstly, I'd like to just talk about the platform. We are a cloud-based system. We do also have a connector that connects to Exo as well. And as Finn has mentioned, we also have an API directly into Acumatica as well. So we host our data, or the client's data, all in AWS in Sydney. So all your data's in Australia and it's not located overseas. We've got an in-house support team as well, and in-house development team based out in our North Sydney office. So our interfaces that are available for users and for any person within the system is through our web interface, which I'm showing you on screen, as well as our mobile app available for Android and for iOS devices. So jumping into the system, I'll take you through how AP invoice automation works. With our system, you'll be forwarding your invoices directly straight into an email address. So we can set up a centralized email address for the finance team. You'd probably have that already set up for the business, and the invoice would come through. Also, users can receive invoices in the system as well. We wouldn't encourage you to advise your suppliers to use that email address to send invoices directly into that email address, because there could be unsolicited emails, and potentially there could be fraud around fake emails and fake invoices coming through into the system. So you would screen your inbox and send them onto the system. The domain, or that web URL that we create for your database, will be for you and your company only. It won't be publicly available. It won't even be shown in emails that we send out through our system. This prevents any phishing attacks, any type of emails that come through, or anyone that tries to hack into the emails. They won't know what the URL for your ProSpend account is, and subsequently they won't try and capture your login details that way. So that's all private to you. So if we look on the left side, we have our vault, which is where all the documents are kept. So this is for receipts for expenses as well as for AP invoices. So I've logged in as an end user, and you can see this user has two email addresses, one for invoices, one for receipts. So they'll be forwarding the invoice or that bill straight into the system here. Part of our system is that we'll have the invoice scanned through straight away. It takes about a minute or two to scan through our machine learning and OCR technology. We have a system where it basically checks the layout, and we escalate that to our support team if it doesn't identify the invoice being extracted the right area, or it might be missing maybe a description if it hasn't seen that layout from that supplier before. We have lots of clients across Australia and New Zealand. So if you're passing through a common supplier invoice like Bunnings or Officeworks, more than likely we've seen that layout, so there's no problem. But our team will be onto that. So you're not forced with having to key in information if it doesn't extract properly. Our support team can handle that as well. So once the invoice comes through on the front screen, they'll be able to see that invoice coming in here. The integration with Acumatica and Exo means the supplier records coming straight into the ProSpend as well. So you don't need to maintain two sets of records between ProSpend and Acumatica. That's part of the API. So all that information will come through, and that's really good. And like I said, the Exo connector is unique in the marketplace in terms of that. So we've got an invoice here that's come through for Inc Media Group. So I'll show you how that looks. So bringing that up on the screen, you'll be able to then reveal the invoice that's been pushed through. You can then bring that to a secondary monitor as well. So you've got those options here. I'll just make that a little bit bigger so you can see that on screen. So we've got our copy of our invoice on screen here, Link Media Group, and it's got all that key information around the invoice number, the amounts, and all the descriptions and the banking information as well. So what will happen there is then we'll scan that invoice in, and from here the information comes across. So you can see on screen we've got all that information. So we've scanned that line. You can decide which suppliers are scanning multiple lines, or you can have a supplier set up where it scans just the headers. So it's really up to you, and you might set up some templates in our system to have maybe splits of invoice lines, and that's all possible in the system. But if we're moving on to the fraud area, you can see you've got some visual cues in the system that alerts you if there is an issue with this invoice. From here, we can see there is an issue with the supplier average. So it's telling me that the last 6 invoices, there was no value because this is a brand new invoice that's come through. And this is a $377.30, so it's flagged that to us. You can see there's a limit as well, and we're below that limit. So that's all fine because we've got no limit against this supplier. And then in terms of the banking information, looking at the supplier master record in Acumatica or Exo and comparing that to what's been scanned in on the invoice, it's telling me there's a match across that as well. If there was a mismatch, it would obviously have that thumbs down. The validation check of the supplier, that supplier's been checked and it's all valid in terms of the onboarding process to make sure that supplier is a legitimate supplier in terms of the ABN and all that type of thing. That can also be done through the ERP in Acumatica as well. And then you can see at the bottom, we have a duplicate invoice check, and it's telling me that invoice doesn't exist already. Our invoice duplicate check system, it also checks against the date. So not just the invoice number, it looks at the date for that supplier. So it might be that you've received multiple invoices from that supplier, same amount, different invoice numbers, but on the same date. And the system will flag that too. So that's part of this check as well. So if I move on to the next part, obviously, if we go back into the item section, we can then change some of the coding. So the coding itself that's coming through from the system is based on that supplier's template. So what the usual general ledger account code is, which we call expense type in ProSpend, in this case training, but we can change where it needs to go. You can also see it's been linked to a no project code, but you might have projects activated in Acumatica. And part of our API, all the projects will come through, and you won't need to maintain 2 lists as well. Same with sub-accounts. If you're using sub-accounts in Acumatica, they'll come through into ProSpend as well, so we can have that set up. I don't have my demo set up in that way. And then you can see the relevant entity and description from the OCR has come through as well. If we needed to do a split, we could do a split here across the system. So we've got a split expense function here. So if I went into the actual transaction in detail, we can then use that split invoice or split expense line and split it out to multiple lines. So you can see how we can do that. We can then bookmark that split for future use and then apply that split each time we receive that invoice. So that's if a normal invoice comes through where there's no purchase orders. ProSpend, as Finn has mentioned at the beginning of the demonstration or the actual session, he talked about how we have a purchase order module. You can raise purchase orders in ProSpend. We have our own purchase order module, and you can go through an approval workflow as well. And we can then scan the invoice and match it directly to the purchase order in the system. In this invoice, we also have, if we go back into the matching area, you can see we have matching, so you can match at different invoices, and the system does that automatically. Here, there's no PO associated to this invoice. The other option is, for part of our API with Acumatica and Exo, is we can pull in those purchase orders that are created in those systems as well as the goods receipts notes in those systems. So the PO would be raised there, the goods receipt notes as well in those systems, and then we'll then pull that in for 3O matching into ProSpend. I've got an example of that, and I won't touch too much on that, but you can see here, if I just scroll up, there's a CJD equipment invoice, and we've got a matching area here. So we've got multiple items here for stock. I'll bring up the invoice, you can see that. If I just zoom in, you can see we've got various things on here, 8 items that we've received invoice for, and 1 item for hubcap and lock nuts. But if we go into the matching area, and I'll just make that smaller, you can see we've got a bit of a variance around the quantities. So we've had 8 items invoiced for that hubcap, and 5 have come in. So there's a mismatch here. So the system doesn't auto match based on all the different areas on the invoice. The item code, you can see there's a match against that, item name, description, and also the quantities and unit price and totals. If we drill into that a little bit in terms of that first invoice line, you'll be able to see the PO, and that's been pulled through from MYOB as well as the purchase receipt. So you can see both the purchase order and purchase receipt has come through. And so it's telling me that there is a variance. So it could be that that item hasn't been received. So this sort of illustrates that sort of making sure that the goods that have been ordered have come in, and keeping an eye on that, and there's no rogue invoices coming into the system. So you can accept that or you can reject that. So, and also in our system, if there's an exact match around the quantities and the prices, the system can auto match and accept that automatically as well. And we can set up tolerance and variances around different percentages by supply if you want. So that's all possible in the system. Moving on to the next bit is once we have the invoice go through an approval workflow, and that might be if there's an exact match against those invoice lines to the PO and the goods receipt note, that there is no approval required. It goes straight onto finance. Finance then finalize the invoice, check the coding, and then export it out to MYOB. The other option is if there is discrepancies, questions around the invoice itself, then it can go to obviously an approver to review and check as well. So I'll just run you through how that looks. So that particular invoice, I'll go through that Ink Media invoice. And you can see we have the coding that's come through. So I'm going to send that off for approval now. So it's going to follow the approval workflows, and they can be based on a cost center approver. We can have approval limits, all those DOA matrix against certain people within each of the approvers. So you could enforce limits against them. So we could have maybe a 2-step approval. And then also, we could also have it where it chooses the right approver based on their approval limit. So it doesn't need to go through 2 steps. It just chooses the right approver. So this invoice has now been sent off for approval, and an email went out to the approver, which is for John. So if I go into the approved area, you can see if I filter by invoice type or transaction type, you can see there is in pending approval, that invoice for Ink Media is sitting there. So users can track the progression of where the invoice is sitting, but also the system sends alerts as well as throughout the workflow as well. So now the invoice has been sent for approval and then alerts come through. So I'll just jump in as John. John will be able to then see any of the transactions where he needs to approve. It could be travel based on our travel manager module. Invoices, it could be expense reimbursements, it could be credit card claims. Because our system handles all expenses and AP in one platform, you don't need to log into multiple systems to see all that in one spot. You've got these filters to filter what you want to see, but at the moment, showing everything here. So for an approver, very easy. They'll just jump in, have a look at the invoice. They could even do this on their mobile phone and review the approval of the invoice. They can then obviously look at the invoice, see that invoice, and then they also have the option to update coding. So let's say they identify that this needed to be a different project, they can make those changes here, or it might go to a different team, they can make those changes here. So they've got all those options here. They can then obviously check the fraud because that's flagged here and see why that's been flagged. And they'll notice that the average is the problem, so they're happy with this. They'll go ahead and then approve this invoice. The other option is obviously to reject, and then they can obviously provide their reasons on why they're rejecting. There's a note section here where you can make comments as well and chat to the person. The invoice is approved, it's within his approval limit, and now it's been passed on to the last person in the workflow. So I'll just jump in now as the approver, the finalization person, which is Jackie in accounts payable. Jackie's jumped in, she can see that invoice. If I just go and filter by supplier invoices, I could also filter by supplier if I wanted to. If you are running multi-entities in ProSpend, you can also filter by entity. You don't need to do a drop-down selection of a specific entity. We have all the entities listed here, and you just filter by entity, or entities will show in one go. Jumping in now to that invoice, you can see it's sitting here for review by finance. And if we go in here, we can then obviously review the document, review the coding, and being finance, we've got the ability to make any changes in terms of where it needs to be coded. So the same controls, the same sort of functions as the approver. And then obviously we can review the fraud areas, and if there was any purchase orders or goods receipts notes matched to this particular invoice, you can then have a look at that as well. Once we've done that, we can finalize, reject, or send back to be reviewed. We have two options around that. You can see reject and review required, and you're probably wondering why there's two options on that. Reject means it needs to be reapproved, and it will need to go through those approval steps again. Review required means it doesn't need to go through the approval steps. It'll go straight to the first person in the workflow and then come back straight to finance. So you've got those options here. So let's finalize this particular invoice. We haven't made any changes, but what I wanted to highlight and illustrate to you is we also have an audit log in the system, so we can see who's approved the invoice, any key coding changes, any emails that have come out. You've got complete transparency around the system. So that particular transaction, you can see John's approved that. You can see the date and time. But if there was some coding changes around, the expenses or, the departments, that can all be updated, or that can all be shown on screen as well. So now we can export this particular invoice, which you guys call bills, into Acumatica or into Exo, and we can have that auto export directly into the system. So that means that as soon as you finalize that invoice in finance, it automatically creates the bill directly into Acumatica. The other option is we can have it where we have the setup where you go through and select invoices in a batch and then export them in a batch. I'll run you through how that looks for exporting in a batch. So if I go in here and I export the invoices, I'll select the relevant ERP. In this case, it'll be an advanced bill. And then if we just export that out, we're selecting which invoices we want to send through. In real time, it should give me an export reference with a link that I can see the invoice or that bill. Clicking through, we'll be able to see that particular bill in MYOB Advanced or Acumatica. We go in here, you can then see that transaction appearing as a bill. You can see it's been posted against Inc Media Group. We can see our link back to ProSpend as well, so we can see the audit history, as well as the invoice lines here and how it's been scanned in terms of the descriptions from the OCR. We've got our reference from ProSpend, all the information around the invoice number. We'll also push through the document into the file section. That's part of the API. Same with expenses. You'll be able to have a copy of the receipts in the system as well, in Acumatica as well. So that's the AP invoice automation in ProSpend. I'll run you through the expense management piece now so you can see how that looks. So walking through the expenses, so as Finn has mentioned, mobile users can use our mobile app to take photos of their expenses. So they'll just take a photo of their receipt as they incur it. We encourage your staff to take photos as they incur, as opposed to holding on to those receipts and then losing them potentially. It just makes it easy for them to then use our phone app just to take a photo. The other options is obviously to email those receipts directly to their email address, or upload from the web interface directly into ProSpend. Jumping in as an end user, you can see all the different receipts that are sitting here, or different transactions that are sitting here already. And this is sitting in their receipts vault for that particular user. So it might be they have an out-of-pocket reimbursement, or it could be for their company credit card. But it's easy for them to take a photo of a receipt. So all they're doing is going through and clicking on new receipt. And then from here, they can take a photo. So my demo environment is actually linked to my laptop. The UI and UX for the mobile app is the same. So if I was to select a receipt that I've already got here, and that might be already saved in your gallery on your device as well. From here, then we can then go through and put in a description of what the receipt is about. So let's say we've got some parking, and maybe we know what type of expense it's for. The expense listing that's showing here, it can be restricted by department. So you can have maybe just for marketing, just their marketing expenses appear. So that's not a problem here. Once we've done that, the OCR will scan in all the key information around the total amount on the receipt, the GST on the receipt, select the relevant GST code and the date and the merchant or that supplier name. So you don't need to worry about filling in any of that. And from here now, we'll start scanning that receipt. The scan itself will take about 30 to 60 seconds, and then it'll sit in the system waiting for that corresponding transaction. We can receive daily feeds from your bank directly into ProSpend if they are a corporate card. So if they're a corporate card, that will come straight into ProSpend. So the user will be able to see the transactions on a daily basis. And that particular receipt that I'm scanning in will then move across and be matched off automatically to the line on the statement from that incoming feed. So I'll show you how that looks. The system will automatically create a claim for that credit card. So I've got an American Express credit card here, and I've got all the transactions that are appearing for February for this particular card holder. So we've got all the different amounts that have come through directly from the bank, all the different information around who the supplier is, the date. And because we've uploaded the invoice or that receipt for our booking, the systems automatically move that across. You can also upload, let's say you forget to take a photo, you can also upload a receipt directly to a line if need be. At the bottom, there is that receipt capturing. This has actually got a receipt, so I can't do that, but normally it would have the camera icon, so you could upload it to the line. So this makes reconciliation and management of your credit card spend very easy at the end of the month. So at the end of that statement period, you can then visually see what is missing. So at the moment, it's showing me in blue what meets the mandatory fields and has descriptions and the coding that's required, as well as the document that's been uploaded. You can see the ones in red are showing that there's something that is missing. So it's saying the expense type's missing. We have the document, but we just need to fill out what type of expense it's for. And you can determine what fields are mandatory, and we can have custom fields set up in the system that might need to be reported in Acumatica or Exo, which we can then integrate with the API as well. So in this case, we've got maybe some training, and then we can just work through that and fill out what's required. We can also mark things as being personal disputed, and you can nominate which account it goes to in MYOB in terms of maybe a clearing account, sundry account, that type of thing as well. This is a taxi, so we're just going to put it against taxis, and we're going to list whites for that's a taxi. Once we work through that, we can then submit this for approval. And again, we can have customized workflows. Usually it's based on that department approval or cost center approval, and we can enforce limits. So it goes through a 2-step approval or 3 steps, depending on how you want that. I won't run you through the integration too much because we've already done that with the AP invoice automation. I might just touch on the reimbursement side. So the reimbursement side will be the same. We're taking photos of receipts like I showed you before. But I do have an example of one where I've been working off a reimbursement claim through the month. So you can see we've got a February claim here. We've got here a receipt that's for looks like a drink that we bought, and we've put in some coding, but we can easily put a new receipt in if need be. So we can say add expense, bring up a receipt that we want, and then bring that through into the system. So there's no problem doing that. So if I just go back into the system, I'll just go out of that. I won't run too much of that. I might run you through now. The next part of the demonstration basically is running you through virtual cards. I will show you the virtual cards, not in too much detail, just mindful of everyone's time. Our virtual card product, as Finn has mentioned, virtual cards is giving you back that ability to issue cards to users instead of dealing with a bank. One of the biggest problems dealing with a bank is having to go through that process of application for a card, providing identification, waiting on the bank, being on hold on queues. It's just endless, right? With our system, you're going through a provider. We actually use Wise, which isn't the ERP, Wise as a financial institution to provide that facility. So you go through a KYB process to be approved by them, and they'll allocate a bank account. So it isn't a line of credit. It's a Visa debit card that's issued to users. But I'll just run you through how that looks. All right, so just jumping in as an admin user. So we have different roles in the system, and with our finance users, you have a segregation of duties potentially. So you can have an admin user which has access to the user creation and the setup of the system. And then you can have also a payer role, which is a person that finalizes the transactions. So that way you don't have the payer or that person that's finalizing an accounts payable having access to setting up suppliers, updating banking information, so you've got those controls to prevent fraud as well, internal fraud as well. This user has both roles, but it's up to you to segregate that if you need to. We have audit logs as well to show if someone's went in to update a master record for a supplier or user record, all that's within the system as well. But if we're talking about the virtual cards, if we click into the virtual card section, you can see it's powered by Wise, but we have our treasury section. Once you've been onboarded and approved by Wise, you'll be able to then see the bank balance, and it's basically funding a bank account. And you're then funding that, and every card's linked to that central balance or that bank account. And you're setting up those cards with those limits. So the limits can be monthly limits, they can be daily limits, they can be transaction limits. It's really up to you how you set up the card. The cards can be, if they're monthly limit cards, they can be recurring cards, and you can have them up to a 4-year period if need be, or you can have cards that are actually issued temporary. And it might be that you have people that are spending personally themselves and they're seeking reimbursement. And instead of them carrying that weight of the business, you can issue virtual cards that are temporary. So they can request a virtual card, a temporary card themselves, go through an approval workflow, obviously providing the reasons why they need to spend on that card, maybe some quotes from different places they're buying things from. And then once that's been approved, finance can issue that card in real time to the user. They can link it to their device and see the card in ProSpend as well. So I might run through that just briefly so you can see that. So once we've had that bank account established and our balance transferred into that bank account, we can then manage the cards in finance and issue cards. So here we can do that. So I just need to put my 2FA. So we have multi-factor authentication. I'm using Google, so I'm using the Authenticator app. But if you've got a Microsoft environment, that will work with Microsoft Authenticator. So once we go in here, we'll just jump in and put in our 2FA information. Hopefully that works. Yep, perfect. We can issue not just a virtual card in ProSpend. We also have the ability to have a physical card. This means that will be posted in the mail to you, which is great because there are certain places like hotels and flights that require the physical card. Once we've done that, we can put our lifetime limit. You can see the card will expire in a year's time, but we could have that in 2029 if we needed to. We're just going to do 1 year in advance. We can put our limit. So let's say we're saying 120,000, 10,000 a month for the next 12 months. Very easy. And a $10,000 limit. You can see we can go down to transactional day limits. We can also have spend rules in place, so we can restrict where they spend on that card. So each card can have its own restriction. So it might be that you prevent them from spending at maybe a gambling place or buying alcohol at a pub. You can put those blocks in place on those cards. This is how we link it to the user. We can then obviously put in our information of that user and also the company information. So we don't want to put personal information. Once we've done that, literally it took only maybe half a minute. That card's now available for the user to use. That's active. They'll get an email with instructions how to add that to their phone. I'll show you how that's done. If I just jump in as that user, Kylie. On the left side, they'll see in here their wallet. So if we go in the treasury section, we'll be able to see the cards, and then they'll be able to see that card. I've got quite a few cards. They're all active because they've got years of expiry. We do have various filters to filter out what's active, inactive, but I'll just show you one of those cards that are sitting here, and I'll just bring up my Authenticate app. So the actual user needs to authenticate. So no one can just jump into your ProSpend account and see that card information. We've got security around that as well. So if I just show you that card, just give me a sec. This is a fake card, so no need to check the recording or screenshot it. It's not real, so it won't work. The card itself, there you go, you can see that. So all you're doing is bringing up your Google Pay or Apple Pay device, your apps, scanning it in on your device, and then you can pay at the counter or you can pay online with those card details. For a user, then they can obviously use the expense side of things, like I showed you with that credit card tool before. So you're getting those transactions directly from Wise into ProSpend. Same thing applies. They're uploading receipts, works in the same way. So you've got the full benefits of expense management with our tool. The great thing about our virtual cards is, depending on the merchant, sometimes the transactions come in instantly. And I've seen that firsthand because I use the virtual cards myself. So it makes it really good as well. If we were an end user and we didn't want to be reimbursed, and let's say we had a big trip and we didn't want a cash advance, or finance are sick of sending those cash advances to people and paying it and not getting the remaining funds, we can request a virtual card as well. So I'll just jump in and show you how that looks briefly. Just log off and go into the right demo site. Just give me 1 second, guys. There we go. Okay, so here at the bottom on the mobile app, we can request a card. No, we can't. I'm telling fibs. Give me 1 second, guys. I think I was on the wrong site. Yeah, I'm on the wrong site. All right, so just jumping in again. So that's just user error, guys. I just had the wrong website. So if we're just jumping in here, you can see here we have two different requests that we can do. We can do the regular monthly card request, or we can do the temporary card request. So this just gives us the ability to have a card that expires in the short-term date. So it might be that you have a card that you might be doing a trip this week. You're coming back on Friday evening. So you can then put in the spend by date here. So the card will expire at that date. So if I just jump in here and select the card, let's say it's a new card, you can also bring up an old card that was there, so you don't have to link it to your device. And then we're saying, okay, we're spending by this date. So we're spending by May the 9th, the 2nd, and then we're putting in our information. So it just makes it really easy. Obviously, this will then need to go through an approval workflow. You can see the approval's been allocated automatically. And then once we've done that, we can put in our reason for needing that card. So we can add in our expense line. So this is effectively a card request, like a purchase order for the card. So we're then choosing what type of expenses for. We've got some accommodation. Let's say we're staying two nights at a hotel, and it's for a project. So let's bring up a project here. So it's for maybe this particular office renovation project. And like I said, the project codes come through from Acumatica if you're using it. And then we can then maybe attach maybe a quotation, an image, or it could be a file that we upload for the approver to then see that quotation for approval. I actually didn't put an amount. Sorry about that. I'll put an amount. Let's say it's $500, $250 a night. That's all good. And if I just jump through, you can then see there's a $500. So you can add in as many lines as you want for different types of expenses. And the card itself is now up to a certain limit. So if I just need to make sure that's valid. Give me a second. I think I'm missing a field. All right, I'll just save that. Yeah, so the card now is limited to this amount. It's $525. So the reason why we've got a $525, even though that was a $500 amount, is that we've got a buffer of 5%. So you can up and increase this amount to maybe 10%, and then you can see it's went up now to $550. So this is for incidentals, any fees that are incurred, anything relating to that spend as well. So then we can submit this to be approved. This will go through an approver's hands. They'll see that particular card request. In this case, it will be John, so I can jump on his phone and then see that particular card request. And if he had any documentation around what he's spending in terms of quotes, he can see that here. He can then dispute that particular expense and that card itself, and then he can obviously approve or reject. Once that's been approved, then the last step is if it's within his approval limit, the last person in that workflow will be Jackie in finance. So she'll then review that, see the card request here, see what they're spending that card on, all that information here. You can see it's for this particular project and it's 2 nights accommodation. She's fine with this. She can then finalize and then issue that card. And obviously need put 2FA, but that will work in the same way as what I showed you with that ProSpend card that was issued directly to the user. So that's pretty much the demonstration just on the AP side of things and the expenses, including the virtual cards. I'll hand that back to Finn and Marsha, and thank you for everyone's time today.
So the first one is, can you set up ProSpend with purchase orders that flow through to MYOB Acumatica and then apply the invoice to the PO once it is received?
Yes, we definitely can do that. So I touched on that in the demonstration when we went through the AP automation part of this, the demonstration. So there's 2 ways we can have the purchase order raised in ProSpend, goes through an approval workflow, and then once that's been approved, obviously send that off to your supplier, and then we can have that also export to Acumatica. So the PO and the invoice can be exported straight into Acumatica. The other option is raising the purchase order in Acumatica, as well as receipting, if need be, against the PO in Acumatica. And then we'll then create the PO and goods receipt note in ProSpend. So when you scan the invoice through, we do the 3O matching in ProSpend, and it'll then push through the invoice or that bill on export straight into Acumatica. So both options.
Right. I think the second question is just, you probably touched on a little bit as well. Does the PO in ProSpend integrate with MYOB Acumatica?
Yep. And it does that through API. Yep.
Yep. Perfect. Does a specific virtual card be set up to post to specific journals, or do all of those purchases go through to the same place?
Yeah, so virtual cards themselves, it depends on how you export it into your system, Acumatica Exo. So the virtual card claims will be posted generally as a journal. We can have it post in as a bill if need be, but that will go against a specific supplier. It would probably be ProSpend as a supplier. When you export it out into your accounting system, into MYOB, how you batch that up is how it creates the journal, right? So it will then create, so if you have multiple virtual card claims for multiple people and you batch that up, it'll be one journal, and it'll identify by description each person, each card holder. It'll say, Kylie Magenta, accommodation, and each line will have that in the narrative. So then you can identify which one relates to which person.
Perfect. Does ProSpend do e-invoicing?
Yes, we do. We have an e-invoicing module. Got a number of clients that are using it. The uptake from the businesses in Australia hasn't been huge, but we definitely have an e-invoicing module, and I'm happy to speak to anyone around that.
Just probably from my side, is it the send and the receive side both, or just one of those?
I am not too sure. I'm pretty sure it's just the receive. So we use, obviously we're on the Pepple network. Finn probably has a bit more details on our providers, but
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Dante. It is just receive at the moment. We are working with the ATO to get that, into the send bit. Again, as working with any government organisation, sometimes things take time, but hopefully we'll get there soon.
Lovely. Thanks for that clarification. The last question is, how long will it take to implement ProSpend?
This varies depending on what modules you're taking on in our system. So as you can see, our ProSpend system is quite extensive. So if you're taking on just AP invoices and you're just wanting to automate and prevent fraud with proper scanning, detecting duplicate invoices, bank validation check, and having controls around approvals, then generally that will take around a 6 to 8 week implementation from kickoff meeting all the way through to go live. We obviously build a database, we'll do all the training as well. If you're tacking on, if you're doing multiple modules and you're doing maybe expenses as well, it might take a little bit longer. If you're just looking at maybe reimbursements for out-of-pocket expenses or virtual cards, maybe 3 to 4 weeks. So it really depends on the modules you take on.
Oh, perfect. That's great. Thanks for that. We've got another one pop up. How many virtual cards can we set up in ProSpend? Will volume affect the platform's performance?
The more the merrier. So you can set up as many as you want. We've got some customers that are using ProSpend to have subscriptions. So instead of having one card, a corporate card, where you have everything for the business bundled and all the different direct debits come from one card, which is a big problem, right? A risk problem too, because what happens if that card gets compromised? Then you have to go and then speak to each of those vendors and update all your banking or your credit card information. We have some customers that use multiple virtual cards that are set up just for that subscription, and they expire after, at the end of that subscription period. So you can have as many. And in terms of the performance, yeah, it doesn't affect ProSpend. We've got customers using hundreds of virtual cards a day, no dramas.
That's great. Thanks for that. I think that's it for the questions. Should we cover off the last few slides, Finn?
Yep, absolutely. No problem. So look, if any of this is of interest, you're more than welcome to reach out to your Kilimanjaro account manager. So the details are there. Obviously, the slide deck will go out. Being Kilimanjaro customers, you should all know who your account manager is. So I'm sure you'll know who to reach out with. And thank you so much for joining us all. Special thank you to Kilimanjaro for putting this together as well. We're really, really appreciative of getting a chance to show you how ProSpend can work with fraud. So thank you very much, Marsha and team.
Well, thanks, Finn, and thanks, Dante, for your time today. And for the audience, we look forward to continuing these conversations. As Finn said, if you've got further questions or you want us to arrange introductions, you want to have a look at the demo, the product, we're happy to arrange that for you. Reach out to your Kilimanjaro account managers, and we'll get that sorted. So thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.